We have got a full 15 games on the main slate for tonight in daily fantasy baseball, which means, as always, when we have so many games available, scores are going to be high. You need some juice to take down a tournament for tonight in daily fantasy baseball, which means we're looking for upside, both at pitcher and at our stack, trying to maximize strikeouts, trying to maximize home runs, et cetera, to give ourselves the possibility of taking down a tournament. We're going to go through 3 pitching options I think have that juice, some stacks I like quite a bit, and some one-offs who could potentially go deep for tonight. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down Friday's 15-game main slate. We're locked set for 7:05 for tonight, and somehow, despite there being 15 games, there are no weather notes for today. We are good to go, play things straight up, use the plays you want to use, and hopefully those ones can vault you towards the top of the leaderboard. Before we take a look at the pitching preview for today, hey, college football fans, the highly anticipated Week 3 slate of games is set to take place this Saturday, and FanDuel and Facebook are teaming up to make sure you get the most out of your weekend. Introducing the Take On Anything contest presented by Facebook, a completely free-to-play daily fantasy contest centered around Saturday's 14-game college football slate. The contest is simple. All you have to do is build your best 7-player lineup and follow along as the games are played to compete for a share of the $25,000 prize pool, including $5,000 for first place. Matchups like Alabama, Florida, Auburn, Penn State, Michigan State, Miami on the schedule. There's bound to be some fireworks throughout the day on Saturday. Kickoff is right around the corner, so download the FanDuel app to get in on the action today. Eligibility restrictions apply. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Also, a quick reminder, we do have our snake draft coming up later on today. That's at 4 p.m. on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages, breaking down the Week 2 main slate snake draft between myself, JJ Zachariason, and Brandon Gadula. JJ won Week 1 of the snake draft, so need to get some revenge here in week number 2. We'll talk about that and also take your questions live on air. The MLB DFS Q&A will follow right after at 4:30. Also, for the Week 2 NFL DFS slate, our preview podcast already posted with myself and Brandon Gadula, breaking down our favorite game stacks and favorite plays each position, also some general process talk for those of you who may be new to NFL DFS. Find that by searching for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Pitching preview for this Friday main slate, Zach Wheeler is the highest salaried pitcher on FanDuel at $10,700. That's actually not too bad given how good he is. Chris Sale, coming off the COVID IL, is $10,000. Walker Buehler is $9,900. Logan Webb is $95,000. Herman Marquez is $9,200. Luis Castillo facing Buehler is $9,000. We have Hyun-Jin Ryu, Dylan Cease, Adrian Hauser, Zach Plesac, Luis Patino, Madison Bumgarner, Ian Anderson, and Brady Singer as the others at $8,000 or higher. So a lot of second-tier guys for tonight. I think the top tier, pretty rock star level, and there is one guy in that second tier I do like quite a bit. But for me, it comes down to a guy I haven't gotten to talk a lot about because he hasn't been on the main slate or he's been in tougher matchups. And I think we're going to take advantage of this guy being available in a matchup I don't mind and put him at the top of our list. That is Logan Webb. And he has been incredible for a while now. And he's weirdly similar to Zach Wheeler, so it's kind of fun to have them both in the main slate. He has amazing batted ball data, Webb does, but he adds a strikeout component as well. And I think that, again, Webb is my number one guy for tonight against the Braves. Webb is doing something I'm usually not a fan of. He is throwing more sinkers. He's been doing that for his past 10 starts, and more sinkers tends to lead to a dip in strikeouts. That hasn't happened with Webb. His strikeout rate across those 10 starts is 27%. He's letting up just a 5% walk rate, and he's letting up just a 21% fly ball rate. When you combine those strikeout numbers with that great batted ball data, you have both a high floor and an amazing ceiling. Webb has shown that. He has a 2.10 ERA in this time. He had 10 strikeouts in one of those games. He had 9 in one, 8 in another. But he just goes deep in games. Again, this is a 10-start sample for Webb, and he has gone 6+ innings every single one of those starts. That is despite throwing 85 or fewer pitches in 2 straight starts. And that could be a concern, but it's not for me because the Giants are fighting for playoff positioning. They're going to let their ace cook, and I would say that he's the ace of the staff right now, and it's a tough matchup. I think you do want Webb out there as long as you can have him. The Braves, they're a tough offense. They will strike out, though. They have a 24% strikeout rate versus righties. It's a great park for pitching. So typically, I'd lean Zach Wheeler over Logan Webb, because if you've listened long enough, you know I greatly appreciate how good Zach Wheeler is. But Webb is at home. You have the dream spot, a little bit lower salaried. I am okay putting him at the top of my list. So Logan Webb, my number one pitcher for tonight in daily fantasy baseball. Wheeler is still second, though. It's also fun because no matter what tweaks Wheeler makes, he's still really good. Most recently, Wheeler's been cutting back on his sliders. He's had 7 starts with less usage there, and that can be a red flag. A lot of times when I see a guy cut back on his slider usage or curveball usage, it sometimes means they're trying to avoid wear, or maybe they're not fully healthy. And if that's the case with Wheeler, you would not know, because in those 7 starts, he has a 3.23 skill interactive ERA. His strikeout rate is 29%. He is still letting up hard contact just 28% of the time. Again, league average around 35%. 39%. And Wheeler has shown no dip in this time. He's had double-digit strikeouts twice here. He had 9 in one, 8 in 2 of the others. He did let up some runs in those games, but with how good the peripherals are, specifically the batted ball data, it's not a big concern for me. He is facing the Mets tonight, which is a revenge game for Zach Wheeler. First of all, that matters above all else. We saw this matchup back on August 8th, and Wheeler threw a 2-hit shutout with 11 strikeouts. The Mets have 94 WRC plus against righties with a 25% strikeout rate. So if Wheeler were at home, I'd put him above Webb. With this game being in New York, I will favor Webb by a hair. Both these guys are great, and I'm very down to go here, and I want to load up on them for sure. But to me, it's going to be Webb 1, Wheeler 2. As far as the lower salaried pitcher, it's going to be a guy who has a lot of upside, but has some flaws. And that's Dylan Cease. And the flaws for Cease are he walks too many guys. He lives in a dangerous batted ball region. And for me, that means I have to use him only in specific matchups. But I think he gets one of those specific matchups for today. So I like Cease a lot at $8,600. He's facing the Rangers. We want Cease facing low-power teams that don't draw a lot of walks. And the Rangers check both those boxes. The walk rate against righties is 7%. That's the lowest on the slate. Their ISO versus righties is 145. So there aren't a lot of matchups better than this one for Cease. Maybe like the Marlins, but it's a pretty short list in terms of trying to identify matchups better than this one for Cease. That allows us to focus more on the upside for Cease, which is sweet. He has basically filtered his changeup out of his repertoire, and in the 9 starts of that being true, he has a 3.46 skill interactive ERA despite all the walks, despite all the fly balls, but it's that low because he has a 35% strikeout rate. In 9 starts, Cease has hit double-digit strikeouts 3 times. He had 9 in another. Now, Cease let up some runs. He let up 7 last time out, but that was against Boston. That's a very different matchup than the Rangers are. So if we are picky, if we are selective, we pick and choose our spots with Cease, we should be able to find success. Basically, just avoid him against the tough teams, utilize him against the softer teams. All 3 of his big strikeout games came against softer opponents. So I think that allows us to use him here, getting an easier matchup here. And I will use Cease despite loving both Wheeler and Webb. Sometimes we'll talk about the value play and not going to be as into it, but I do think here it's very okay to be high on Dylan Cease for today. And if we're talking like single entry, I think there is some consideration to Cease in that format too. So to me, he is very worthy of being in your player pool for today. So to me, it's 1 Webb, 2 Wheeler, 3 Cease, but all 3 of those guys, at least considerations for me when it comes to single entry lineups. Let's move down to the stacks. We don't have to be as salary conscious because Webb's $9,500. Wheeler's not too bad either. And then Cease is pretty good. So we can afford to go at some pretty powerful teams. One of those is the Red Sox. And I do like them a lot here versus Keegan Aiken. And the Red Sox, I would say, honestly, relative to my expectations for them, have been underwhelming against lefties. Their ISO is 159, which is, it's very middling. I think they could boost that tonight against Aiken. Aiken has a profile we want to stack against. He has made 7 starts since he rejoined the rotation for Baltimore, and his skill interactive ERA in that time is 5.28. It gets that high in part due to a high walk rate, which does mean he lets up fewer balls in play. Not a huge fan of that from a DFS perspective, but Aiken also lets up a 53% fly ball rate with just a 20% strikeout rate. If the walks were lower, this matchup would check every box we want for stacking. The results have reflected this because Aiken has a 5.56 ERA in this time, and it's come against some tougher teams, but we saw Aiken against Boston in the stretch too, when he got chased after 4 innings and let up 4 earned runs. He had just 2 strikeouts compared to 3 walks. The Red Sox had a 53% fly ball rate in that matchup. So the components for power are there, even if the Red Sox have not converted yet all that much against lefties. So I think they will do that tonight, and I do think that we should be high on this Red Sox lineup in this matchup. Now, the one guy worth discussing here is Bobby Dahlbeck, because Dahlbeck is no longer a value play. His salary is up to $3,100, and that could give you some pause, because Dahlbeck, still a flawed hitter, stuff like that, but kind of don't care. Still going to plug him in personally because, again, we're looking for guys who have upside on a full slate. Obviously, Hunter Renfroe has that, et cetera, but like, so does Dahlbeck. Bobby Big Fly has the platoon advantage. He's basically like, I don't know, he's like a Joey Gallo type guy where you want to target these types of players for DFS. It's the perfect profile for DFS. The floor might suck, but that's true for every single batter on the planet. So it's going to be hard for me not to be in on Dahlbeck here at $3,100. I think that even though the salary's gone up, I still want to be there. So Bobby Dahlbeck to me still a priority, despite the fact he is no longer a value play. In the second stack, we're going to lean on some of the lower salary guys to stack this team. But I do think that those lower salary guys have upside. And that allows me to stack the Astros tonight. They're facing Madison Bumgarner. It just doesn't seem like Bumgarner's right at the moment. He's been getting blasted by teams that struggle with lefties. His past 2 starts have both been against the Mariners. The Mariners, pretty lefty-heavy team, not that great against lefties. And Bumgarner let up 5 runs in both those games, with 5 total home runs across the 2 games. 2 starts before that, Bumgarner faced the Pirates. They also hit 2 home runs and scored 4 runs against him. Now he's facing Houston, who has a 124 WRC plus against lefties, which is a yikes type situation. The peripherals for Bumgarner are rough. He's been leaning more on his changeup his past 9 starts. His strikeout rate is down to 18%. Fly ball rate is 45%. It's a pretty rough combination. And it's even rougher when you're facing a quality team like the Astros are. I'm not sure if Bumgarner's name value will scare people away here. I could see people being pretty hip to this one, given how much Bumgarner has struggled recently. So I don't think they'll be under the radar despite the name value in Bumgarner, but I do still think that the Astros worth targeting here. And the good thing is, it's not a good thing. It's a bummer thing. With Michael Brantley on the IL, Michael Brantley is a tremendous veteran, so it's not a good thing he's on the IL. What it does do, though, is open up 2 spots for their lower salaried outfilders. So let's rank those guys. All 3 guys are right-handed batters. So that does help. So if they won't all 3 be in there. 2 of them will be. But let's say in terms of prioritization, I'd put Jose Siri first. He is just the most talented guy here. I put Chas McCormick second. McCormick had a big fly last night. I just like his overall power profile quite a bit, but Jake Myers has shown some pop against lefties in a very, very, very small sample. So my ranking is Siri 1, McCormick 2, and Myers 3. But I love all 3 of those guys. And let's say it's Siri and Myers, I'll put those 2 in. If it's McCormick and Myers, I'll put those 2 in. Siri and McCormick, I'll put them in too. I think that using 2 of those value plays in order to get the leverage to get to Altuve, to Bregman, Gurriel, et cetera, I'm down with that for tonight. So I do think the Astros, easy to stack for tonight, and a team that I do want to stack as well. Our third stack is one leaning pretty heavily on platoon splits, because Casey Mize is a guy whose outlook depends heavily on the opposing team. If they are like a righty-heavy team like the Cardinals or something like that, he's fine. Lefties give him a lot of trouble. And he's facing the Rays tonight, and they've got a lot of lefties, even with Wander Franco being out. So I think the Rays are a good stack here tonight. For the full season, Mize is letting up a 280 ISO to left-handed batters. The batted ball data says that's pretty legit as well. And I'm sure the Mize is aware of this because he's been tinkering. He's been throwing fewer to splitters recently. That's a heavy usage pitch for him versus lefties. And I'm kind of confused about that because it's not like a bad pitch, but I feel like maybe he's thinking, okay, I got to change something here with how the things have been going versus lefties. I'm kind of confused, but it hasn't worked either way. Mize has a 17% strikeout rate in this time with a 4.92 skill interactive ERA. It could just be that the Tigers are trying to save him for 2022. Like, hey, we're going to have you put that splitter away. It's a pretty high wear pitch. His pitch counts have been down as well. Either way, whatever the explanation is, it's led to some pretty serious struggles for Mize. He faces the same Rays lineup over the weekend. He lasted just 2 innings, gave up 3 earned runs. So he's probably not going deep tonight, but this bullpen is not one that bothers me. So I think it makes a lot of sense to load up on the Rays here for tonight. And the big hope for me is that Brett Phillips plays because he's played in 3 of the 5 games since he came off the IL, and Nelson Cruz is banged up now. Phillips has a 281 ISO versus righties with tons of fly balls, so I really want to jam him in there. I would say that Ji-Man Choi is solid too, but I would rank him behind Phillips if both play because Choi can occasionally leave early for Yandy Diaz at times. So prefer Phillips over Choi, but I think both are in play for tonight in terms of salary savers as far as left-handed batters go, facing Casey Mize. Things to watch for this slate, focusing on 3 more offenses where we can get some batters from. I do like the White Sox tonight facing Taylor Hearn. Hearn is getting stretched out as a starter. He wasn't a high strikeout guy, even the bullpen, and his slide ball rate is super high. I think that the reason the White Sox are not as high is because the hard hit rate that Hearn is allowed is not super high. So we can stack against him, but I think that that's the reason why I put them 4th behind the Rays, Astros, and the Red Sox, but they're still a solid stack here as well. Not opposed to stacking the Cardinals. They're facing Vince Velasquez. Velasquez, once again, had massive issues at the end of his tenure at the Phillies, and he's back to being a guy we can stack against here as he moves to his new team. The reason the Cardinals weren't higher is that they're not a deep team. Like, if you look at their lineup versus righties, there aren't a lot of guys on that team you want to use in daily fantasy. So I will use them, but I want to be in more select spots. They're kind of more of a one-off team, like a 3-player stack with O'Neill, Arenado, Goldschmidt. That works as well, but definitely not the deepest team in terms of stacking. Finally, if you got the salary, I am down for some one-offs on the Yankees. They're facing Zach Plesac, and Plesac has started to trend up recently, been getting a bit better, but he's still letting up a 46% hard hit rate with a 42% fly ball rate his past 7 starts. That's probably not going to cut it. So this is more for one-offs and full stacks because Plesac has been better, but this team does grade out well there. So to me, the options are the top 3 being the Red Sox, the Astros, and the Rays. And then in consideration are the White Sox primarily, but then the Cardinals and the Yankees potentially for some one-offs. Let's finish up with some dinger calls for this Friday slate. Going back to Boston for the first one, facing Aiken and that big fly ball rate. I got to go Hunter Renfroe. He's too good against lefties for me to not go there. I do love Bobby Big Flies, but I'm choosing one straight up for my boring call. Let's go with Hunter Renfroe. The fun one, we'll go back to the Rays. And I'm going to hope Brett Phillips plays, because if Brett Phillips plays, he'll be my home run call. I just love the power he's shown versus righties. He puts the ball in the air. I think the matchup is great too. So if Brett Phillips plays, he is my home run call. If not, I'll go Ji-Man Choi as the boring one. So the home run calls for today are Hunter Renfroe and Brett Phillips. If Phillips does not go, give me Ji-Man Choi instead. That is all that we have here for today on the solo shot, but plenty more coming up later on today here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Austin Swain will be breaking down UFC for this weekend for Saturday's card. I'll be talking the Bristol Night Race that is coming up 10:30 a.m. on the FanDuel YouTube page, up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that. And again, our Week 2 DFS preview already posted up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Find that wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, hit subscribe and leave us a rating and review as well. If you've got more questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you tonight. We'll talk to you once again on Monday. Have a fantastic weekend. This has been the solo shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.